Good morning, I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. And as usual, I have a lot to talk about and need to get straight to it with my good friend Frank Granett. And he's with an excellent organization that has partnered with the Price Business in an ongoing education and information campaign. This organization is called CAOOY. At CAOOY.org. And our partnership is called the Price of ADHD Business. And what we're trying to do is talk about the economic and social and other mental health care dynamics, if you will, surrounding ADHD and the over-medication of the issue. And I love the work we've been doing, Frank. Tell us a little bit more about CAOOY and then talk about our guest today.
Yes, CAOOY, Kevin, stands for Coalition Against Over-Medicating Our Youth, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's an educational public charity, and our mission when we joined Alliance months ago, Kevin, is to basically help families help their kids as well as themselves if they're going through this ADHD-like condition. And in that quest that you and I basically have gone through in the last month, we've had tremendous guests on our program, and today is no exception. This is probably the most intriguing guest we've ever had. She's Australian-born. She came to Colorado back in late 1990s. But here's the most important piece. She brought with her a technology called Crossinology brain integration technique. And we're going to learn more about this for the treatment of dyslexia as well as ADHD. And her name is Susan McCrossin. She has a degree in applied physiology. And Susan, welcome to our program today.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Susan, why don't you start off with kind of telling us your own personal story? I got a little bit of information on that. I think it's very, very interesting to the audience.
Okay, so I went through the school system in Australia, and we have a similar system to England, where after 12 years of school, you have one set of state-run final exams. So I did very well in classwork, very well in assignments, but when it came to having to memorize things for exams, I didn't do so well. I didn't understand my problem because I wasn't a behavioral problem, and I ended up failing high school because I failed ancient Greek history, which I can tell you has never really held me back in life. But technically I failed high school. So luckily for me, I got a scholarship in year 10 based on IQ tests, and I was able to talk my way into a technical college and studied industrial design initially, and I passed that, and then I fell into computing, as I describe it. And so years later, I decided to do something more humanitarian in nature, and I started doing this applied physiology, and I start working with children with learning problems. And I watch what they're doing, and I discover I'm doing the same thing. I actually have a learning problem. I was 39 before I discovered it. And so
wow.
I didn't memorize. I didn't have that mind's eye where you can see stuff in your mind's eye. It was just a black hole in my head. So
wow.
I started developing this technique, worked on children, had a child psychologist sending us children and sitting them through what's called the WISC test, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children. And you're not supposed to change on a WISC in your lifetime. If you rank sort of in the 45th percentile at 10, you'll be there at 50. And we were quadrupling and 5 timesing their scores. I got integrated. I then went back to university and did a double degree in neuroscience and psychology and ended up graduating equal top student. It's an exam, and I can see the page in the book.
Susan, you talk about in your book breaking the learning barrier, eradicating ADHD and dyslexia. In the book, this technique that, the Crossinology brain integration technique, could you give us like one success story on the ADHD side, briefly, just describe to our listeners, what that 1, 2, 3 step looks like, and just briefly how you incorporated that and brought this technology over in this technique?
Okay, well, I work on children and adults. So typically they bring their child in, and one of the parents eventually confesses that they have the problem too. And I worked on a man, it was sometime last year, and he had ADHD, and he was with his brother. They were opening a car dealership, and he told me that he'd go into the office in the morning, and he'd be at the desk doing some task that was very important. Then one of the other staff would come and ask him a question, and then he'd leave his desk, and he wouldn't get back to it till 5 o'clock. And then he'd realize that this was something that had a deadline at 10 o'clock. So he was very skeptical when he came in. It's an acupressure technique with a very specific method. The person doesn't do any exercises. They just relax on a massage table. And he called me after I worked on him and he went back to work. He said, "Oh, my God, now when people distract me, I remember that I have to go back to the task on the desk. I satisfy what they want, and then I go back and finish what I was doing." It's fabulous.
Yeah, that is fabulous. And by the way, before Frank gets his next question, what is your website?
My website is Crossinology, CROSSIN, which is my name, OLOGY.com.
Very good. Frank?
And Susan, you just described this case study, if you will, but like how many sessions is this a typical where you're seeing response as well as, adults and children? Like, are we talking a few sessions or in this case was it just the one session?
Typically takes about 8 hours. So if it's a small child, I'll give them a break. If they're very small, I'll do half an hour on, half an hour off, that sort of thing. And we do it over a couple of days.
How does your methodology compare to others that you've seen out there?
Pretty much everybody else is doing exercises, hoping that it will change how the brain functions. So you get on a balance board or you march. And my experience with people in exercises is they do them for about 2 weeks, just like gym memberships, right? And then they stop going, right? And they stop doing it, and so it doesn't hold long term. Whereas I'm holding points on the body and on the head in a very specific method, right? There's like 80 steps. It's a logical progression of methods. So I'm using Eastern techniques to change what I know goes on in the brain as far as neurologically is concerned.
Susan, like a Chinese therapy, that type of technique?
Yes, it's a little different. I use muscle testing. That's my applied physiology because the muscles are controlled by the subconscious mind. So I can use muscle testing to find out what the problem is. I have various methods of touching points in combination to find out. And typically, someone with ADHD, in fact, almost always, they have low logic access. You have two sides of your brain. You have the creative side that you're born with, and then logic's supposed to come online it starts coming online at about the age of 2. And that's when you start to understand consequences, understand the concept of time so that you can keep your attention over time, stay focused. And for various stress reasons, in some people it doesn't come online, and it never comes online.
Well, I think it's a fascinating concept and very important for people to learn more about it. Real quickly, tell us a little more about your book.
So in the book, I describe exactly what the problem is, why someone's having a problem and why the symptoms are as they are. And then I have lots of case studies in there that I mention every time I tell the story. I make a point, then I tell a story about something, because people remember stories better than hard facts. And I've got my research, an abbreviation of my research that I did, brain scanning people before and after treatment, and they all changed from abnormal to normal. There's an abbreviated version of it in that, and you have the full version on my website for those of the enthusiastic readers who want to read the whole thing.
Very good. Frank, why don't you wrap it up with the couple of minutes we have left, also CAOOY.org, and let's give our guest again, Susan, your website one more time.
Okay, it's Crossinology, CROSSINOLOGY.com.
Very good. Wrap it up for us there, Frank.
And Susan, thanks for your perspective and the information that you've been working on for decades now. And it goes to prove that, the ADHD condition is real. There are real symptoms. And just today, by your information and getting the book, Breaking the Learning Barrier, Eradicating ADHD and Dyslexia, check that out. And again, at CAOOY.org, there's a straightforward action plan to get to the root cause of ADHD and get kids and adults back on the right track.
Yeah, it's so needed, so needed. It's amazing how, as a culture now, we kind of knee-jerkly go straight to drugs, and there's so often other avenues and things that can augment or supplement medication. And I love the work that you're doing, Frank, and I love that we get to do it together. Susan, thanks so much for bringing us some more tools in that front.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yes, you're right. The good nutrition is important as well, so the brain gets the right food.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different battlefronts. We tend to often go to the one that appears easiest, but also has the most consequence, I think. So it's great that we continue to have this discussion. Thanks to both of you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you.
When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, of course, the best content here can be found over there, usdailyreview.com, including this interview. While there, like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter, and you're listening to The Price of Business.